I'm Dr. Lena Popovic, and after 30 plus years in medical practice, I realised there's a lot missing from modern medicine. Education is more powerful than medication, and our decisions have more impact than our DNA. Hello, for today's episode, I'm sharing an interview I had with the dynamic and inspiring Sarah Rusbatch on her podcast, Stronger, Bolder, Wiser. Sarah is an accredited grey area drinking coach and the author of the best-selling book, Beyond Booze, How to Create a Life You Love Alcohol-Free. And Sarah and I immediately clicked because her approach to alcohol is the same as my approach to healthy eating in my book, NeuroSlimming. Sarah's philosophy is that the goal is to love yourself so much you don't need a drink. I feel exactly the same way about food. The goal isn't to quit ultraprocessed food. The goal is to love yourself so much you don't need to numb your emotions with food. Sarah is also a multi-award-winning Health and Wellbeing Coach, a Menopause Accredited Coach, and a passionate ambassador for helping women live their best lives. And most importantly, Sarah lives everything she speaks and glows from the inside out. So although the interview doesn't technically follow my usual format of brain booster, health headline, what's missing from modern medicine, and weather report, we certainly cover a lot of brain boosters, health headlines, and things that are missing from modern medicine, especially in relation to why women are currently twice as likely to get Alzheimer's dementia as men, but why this doesn't have to be the case. So please, enjoy my conversation with Sarah Rusbatch.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Stronger, Bolder, Wiser. This week we are addressing a topic that is so close to my own heart, and I can only imagine is close to your hearts too, because I think there is no one I know who does not have some connection to someone in their life who's been impacted by dementia. And it's a topic I wanted to talk about specifically because in my learning, in my research, I've discovered that us women are so much more vulnerable to the risks of dementia than men. And so I wanted to find an expert to bring in and talk to us about everything we need to know about why us women are more vulnerable to it. And more importantly, what can we do? What is in our control to lower our risk of developing dementia at some point in our life? And for me, there was only one person I could bring on, and that was Dr. Helena Popovic. Dr. Helena is a medical doctor, a best-selling author and international speaker who shows people how to boost their brain at any age or stage of life so that they can perform at their peak throughout their career, eliminate brain fog in menopause, and we all know about that, don't we, ladies, and avoid Alzheimer's and other dementia in retirement. She also provides a roadmap for living longer, stronger, healthier, and happier. Everything that this podcast is all about. Dr. Helena graduated from the University of Sydney. She spent 30 years researching the brain and teaching people how to reach their full potential. Discovering how to boost our brain is the single most important thing we can do to achieve our goals, solve complex problems, and create a fulfilling life. Her philosophy is that education is more powerful than medication. I could not agree more. And she believes in growing bolder rather than older. Oh, yes. She is the author of 3 best-selling books. In Search of My Father is a guide to caring for someone with dementia. Can Adventure Prevent Dementia? Shows how we can all build a better brain. And NeuroSlimming, Let Your Brain Change Your Body, reveals how to shed excess body fat without dieting, deprivation, or drugs. If diets haven't worked for you or you're an emotional eater, this book was written for you. And I can actually confer with that because I've read the book and it's brilliant. She's returned from Sri Lanka where she trekked the 300-kilometer Pecco Trail in 14 days, averaging 20 to 30 grueling hilly kilometers per day to spread the message that adventure prevents dementia. And it's never too early or too late to improve the health and functioning of our brain. Welcome, Dr. Helena. I presume you're home now. So where is home for you?
I live on the Gold Coast. That's known to the traditional owners of the land as Jelurgal. And I pay my respects to the Yagambeh speaking people and to their elders past and present. And I love living here.
Thank you. So let's dive in. I think something that we hear talked about a lot when we talk about brain disease is dementia and Alzheimer's. What is the difference? Are they the same with two different names? Or what is the key difference that we need to know when we talk about dementia and when we talk about Alzheimer's?
They're not the same. Alzheimer's is a subtype of dementia. So dementia is an umbrella term for more than 100 different diseases of the brain, all of which can lead to progressive decline in our cognition, i.e., our ability to think and make sense of the world around us. And to be defined as dementia, that decline has to be to the extent that it interferes with our capacity to function in daily life independently. And depending on the specific type of dementia, the symptoms can include short-term memory loss and the ability to form new memories, regularly misplacing things, forgetting how to do things you used to be able to do easily, like cooking a favorite meal, without having to rely on a recipe, repeating yourself in conversation, like real problems with speech or comprehension, forgetting words more than just, oh, it's on the tip of my tongue, but you actually just don't know how to find that word anymore. You get easily confused, struggling to make plans and decisions. A big one that people are not aware of, and this is a red flag because it occurs quite early in most dementias, is apathy. Just the loss of motivation and the loss of desire to do anything. You just lose interest in things that you really love to do. It's given the fancy name of abulia, in case you wanted to know. And the other things that can happen are just difficulty concentrating and personality changes. So I know that's a lot of different symptoms, and not everyone will get all of them because it depends on which parts of a person's brain are affected by their specific dementia. So the way I think about it is dementia, the word dementia is analogous to the word cancer. There are many subtypes of dementia, just like there are many subtypes of cancer. And dementia is actually the most feared of all diseases because if you lose your mental faculties, it's like you lose yourself. And people around you feel like they've lost you as well. They're losing you. And the other reason people fear dementia so much is because they don't realize there is a lot they can do to improve their brain function at any age or stage of life and even after a diagnosis of dementia. So that's dementia. Very briefly, Alzheimer's, as I said, is the most common type of dementia. And it accounts for 60 to 70% of cases worldwide. And that's why we hear the most about it. And that type of dementia usually presents with short-term memory loss and the apathy when it first starts. The second most common type of dementia is vascular dementia. The biggest risk factor for vascular dementia is having had a stroke or, and this is a big one that we can control, high blood pressure throughout midlife, i.e. it's between our 40s and 60s that if we have really high uncontrolled blood pressure, massively reduces our risk of dementia. After our 60s, high blood pressure isn't so bad. Interesting. Then there's Lewy body dementias, which develop in about a third of people with Parkinson's disease. Frontotemporal dementia, which is what Bruce Willis has been diagnosed with. Then there's, you would probably know, alcohol-related dementias, HIV-associated dementias, and I won't list the other 94 types of dementia. So basically, dementia refers to a lot of different brain diseases that basically rob us of our ability to function in the world.
Wow, I had no idea that there were so many different types of dementia. So that makes sense now to understand that. So thank you for explaining. I'm curious to know, what would be the most common age that someone is diagnosed?
Specifically in relation to Alzheimer's, roughly 1%, i.e. 1 in 100, 60 to 64-year-olds has Alzheimer's disease. And
What?
then 1 in 100.
Wow.
Yeah, it's high.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, and from there onwards, so the older you get, the more common it is, but roughly every 5 years, the number, until about the age of 85, the number tends to double. So that means you'll have 1 in 50 over 65-year-olds. You'll have 1 in 25 70-year-olds. If you just do the maths, 1 in 12 75-year-olds. And it gets up to about 1 in 3 85-year-olds.
My goodness. And ladies, if you're as shocked as I am right now, please know that we are going to cover all the things we can do to protect
Correct.
our brain as we age. So is this because it's a progressive aging illness based on the risk factors that we're exposed to over many, many, many years, which is why the risk increases so steadily the older we get?
Yes, basically, the changes in our brain that lead to Alzheimer's. I'll talk about Alzheimer's in particular, but
Mm.
the principles are pretty much the same for all of them. The changes in our brain start as early as our 30s and 40s. But because we're still young and fit, our brain can compensate for minor glitches. But over the years, it's accumulated damage to our brain. It's years of sleep deprivation, not just 2 or 3 years while you've got a toddler. It's decades of sleep deprivation that erode brain function. It's decades of having type 2 diabetes. It's decades of a poor diet. And that's why as we age, it increases. But here's the thing. There's what's known as the Lancet Commission report, which are the smartest brains, neuroscientists in the world, have put together 14, and there's more, but they're their top 14 risk factors that occur throughout life. And the first one is having low education as a child. Here's the thing, the higher your education, the more years you've spent at school, high school, and then university, the more you build up your brain. And so you start at a higher level in terms of your brain function. Now, if you then have a life filled with risk factors for dementia, you will decline, but you're starting at a higher point, so you'll get dementia at a later age. Does that make sense? So it's what we do
Wow.
throughout.
Wow, this is incredible. So how common is Alzheimer's then? So you said it's the most common of all the types of dementia. Is it mostly in the Western world? I'm curious to know as well,
No,
if you know. Okay.
everywhere it's becoming increasingly common. And that's just because our Western lifestyle is infiltrating everywhere.
True.
But basically, the numbers are every 3 seconds, someone somewhere in the world is diagnosed with dementia. And this is a disease that tends to be underdiagnosed. So the numbers are probably much higher. And according to the World Health Organization, there are currently more than 55 million people in the world diagnosed with dementia at this point in time. Globally, dementia is the 7th most common cause of death. But in Australia, it's the number 1 cause of death in both women and men. And it used to be just the number 1 cause of death in women, but late last year, dementia overtook heart disease as the leading cause of death in men as well. Yeah.
If anyone's just watching this right now, if you're watching this on video, you'll be able to see that my jaw is on the floor and I am literally just staring at you with eyes wide open going, oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, right. I am
But
so
this is
we are
gonna
having
end up
this
being
conversation.
This will be a good news podcast because I'm painting the worst case scenario if a person is not proactive about their brain health. The minute you become proactive, the minute you even just set the intention of boosting your brain, you will start to lower your risk.
Wow. Okay, ladies, we are coming on to all of that. Now, I just want to rewind a minute to when you first listed some of the most common symptoms that we might be aware of. Many of them sound like me right now,
Yes.
perimenopause. So how do we know the difference? Like brain fog, forgetfulness. I feel like I go through all the family's names before I land on my son. Even the dog gets a shout out sometimes. And so is that cause for concern? Or like, how do I know the difference between brain fog and perimenopause and Alzheimer's risk?
Okay. The first thing is timing. If it is occurring around the time of menopause, it is most likely secondary to the hormonal changes that you are experiencing. It's not just the hormonal changes. If you think about a woman's life in her late 40s, early 50s, that is one of the biggest, most stressful, most intense times in her life. One, she might still have children that are sort of getting towards adulthood, but still dependent. That's the time when her parents are probably aging, and most of that care, I'm not being sexist, but still women tend to do more of the caring for their parents rather than men. I'm not saying men don't, they do. But still, 2/3 of, like the stats, 2/3 of carers of people with dementia or carers with any kind of disability, illness are women. And she's got to a point where she's reassessing her life because there are so many physical and psychological and emotional changes. So I would say if it was at that time, unless you have a family history of somebody that had early onset dementia, and when I say early onset, it means the dementia occurred before the age of 60. That's a different kettle of fish to the age-related dementia because it's often, but not always, genetically predetermined. So, but you could do an audit of your life too. The other thing that happens also is that we become less tolerant, women, all of us as we age, but especially women, we handle alcohol less well. So alcohol is going to have a bigger effect on us. We've lost more muscle mass. So lack of exercise is going to have a bigger negative effect on us. We might be having a bit of hearing loss or eyesight compromise. All those things affect cognition. So I would go to and just rule out, do an audit of your diet, your alcohol, your physical exercise, your stresses, check your blood pressure, check your hearing, check your eyesight. Do those simple things, rule them out. And then if it's, in your late 40s, early 50s, I would put my money on the fact that it is menopausal change. It's the abrupt disruption in estradiol levels. And then I would do a trial of estrogen replacement therapy, hormone replacement. It's now called menopausal hormone therapy, MHT. So I would do a trial. It's a very simple thing to do. And if your symptoms suddenly clear up, and it's like, I don't prescribe a lot of drugs. People know if they come to me, my goal is to get you off medication, not on medication. But menopausal hormone therapy is one of these that I just find it's one of those few things where women will come back to me in a few months and go, I got my life back. And, I'm not
sure.
company. So that's my answer to that question.
Yeah. And that would be the case for me. Like I was talking to Dr. Paul Taylor, who I think you also know, and I did an interview with him recently.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the fact that I can always tell when my menopause hormone therapy, I have to change my patch every 3.5 days when it's coming time to a change, because my ability to manage stress starts to drop and my anxiety starts to increase. So let's just say my son's coming home late from school. When my menopause hormone therapy is where it needs to be, I've just changed my patch. I'm like, bloody hell, where is he? Why is he so late? When I'm at the end of that 3.5 days, or say I've forgotten to change it and it's the 4th day, my immediate response to William not being home from school yet is, oh my God, he's fallen off his bike. He's fallen into the river. He's fallen off the bridge. He's in hospital. I need to call all the hospitals and see where he is. And the thing that has changed is that my patch is ready to be changed. It's insane for me how my thoughts in my brain and my catastrophizing and how I feel and just my mental clarity and everything, whether I'm on time changing my patch or not. It's bonkers. But obviously it's working for me, right?
Yes. Now there's another theory about the purpose of brain changes. This is a theory, okay, but I find it a really fascinating one, about the purpose of brain changes in a woman during the time of menopause. She's finished her child rearing, so nature says, okay, you can finally prioritize yourself. And what you'll probably also notice is that your filter goes down, i.e., you're more likely to speak your mind. You do have a shorter fuse. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Maybe you've been putting up with stuff that you shouldn't have been putting up with. Maybe you've been putting up with people being, messy and untidy and not loading the dishwasher and leaving everything up to you. And finally, your hormone levels being low now don't allow you to tolerate it as well. And you go, you know what? Enough is enough. You can clean up your own mess. So in some ways, you can view us being less tolerant as, it's time to prioritize ourselves. That's just a positive reframe that I'm suggesting.
I love this. I was doing a talk in my membership group last week, and we were talking with a guest speaker. We were talking about the stages of motherhood, and she was talking about the MAGA stage, which is after you've gone through menopause and your estrogen is negligent,
Yeah.
and how this is the time to prioritize you. This is also known as the queen stage. So this is where we all become queens. We put our crowns on and we start going, okay, my role is no longer to nurture and look after everybody else. My role is to actually start nurturing and looking after myself. And I love that. And listeners, I will be doing a whole podcast specifically on the stages of womanhood, because I think it's really important that we explore this. And I think my next question for you, Helena, is, so what is the difference between men and women when it comes to like general dementia and when it comes to Alzheimer's? Like, how many more diagnoses do you see happen for every woman to every man?
2/3 of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's are women. So basically it's twice as common in women.
Wow.
Number one. Yeah. So, and as I said earlier, 2/3 of people caring for someone with Alzheimer's are also women. And if you look at the unhealthiest people in our society, very sadly, those with the worst health are the Indigenous population. But those with the second worst health are carers. So I think a contributing factor, again, this is my personal observation and theory. You won't read this in the textbooks, but the stress of caring actually erodes brain function. Okay. So the fact that women are caring for other people could be a contributing factor. However, why are women so much more likely to get Alzheimer's than men? It's a complicated story where it's one we're still trying to figure out, but it does appear to be linked to the abrupt drop in estradiol levels. Estradiol is a type of estrogen hormone. And estradiol has multiple effects in many different regions of the brain. For a start, estradiol, and I will explain these terms, but I think it's real. I think women want to know the details.
For sure.
Estradiol facilitates glucose metabolism, glucose being a primary fuel for the brain. And it also facilitates mitochondrial function, which are the energy generating organelles in our cells. So estradiol helps to ensure that our brain has adequate energy. So when estradiol levels plummet, the brain is like, uh-oh, I don't have enough energy. So what's going to happen? It's not going to function as well if it hasn't got as much energy as it needs. And it will also start using what are known as ketones, and if available, lactate for fuel. And a subset of brain cells called astrocytes make ketones from fatty acids delivered to the brain via the blood. But if the brain can't get enough fatty acids from circulation, it starts to break down the lining of brain cell fibers called myelin, and loss of myelin leads to the loss of signaling between brain cells, and that's another reason our brain doesn't work as well as it should. So there's massive changes in our brain when estradiol levels plummet. And some researchers suggest that symptoms of menopause, like hot flushes, are actually signifying the brain's transition from using glucose to using ketones for fuel. And when the symptoms of hot flushes fade, as they do eventually, it can take years, but even without any treatment, eventually those hot flushes will go away. And it indicates that the brain has finally adjusted to its new fuel source. Now, that link with hot flushes is still only speculative. It's only a theory, but I find it highly plausible. And finally, there are other reasons, and I think women need to know. Estradiol also facilitates production of antioxidants, production of neural growth factors, and it helps to clear brain toxins. So when estradiol declines, so do all these protective functions. And a final point is that the fitter and healthier a woman is before menopause, the less her brain will be negatively impacted after menopause. And one of the biggest things here is if she was physically active, not necessarily going to the gym, but physically healthy, and especially doing strength training, big protective factor in terms of getting through menopause with fewer symptoms and less likely to get brain fog and Alzheimer's as she ages.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. This is so interesting. Has there been research done then? Because hearing all of this, my immediate thought is well, then it becomes a no-brainer as to why women should be on menopause hormone therapy as a way of not getting that sudden drop in estradiol, which the brain needs as a protective factor. Has there been any research done specifically on, does being on MHT lower your risk of developing Alzheimer's or dementia?
Yes, there has been research, and the answer is nuanced. And I will rewind just slightly because this is something really crucial that women need to know. Having a hysterectomy, that means taking out your uterus, or an oophorectomy, which means removing one or both ovaries, prior to menopause, both of those operations, whether it's just your uterus or your ovaries or both, that disrupts estradiol production by your ovaries, and that also significantly increases the risk of Alzheimer's. And the younger a woman is when she has that hysterectomy, the worse her long-term brain health is likely to be. The good news is MHT will completely abolish that risk. So I want every woman, if she's had her uterus or ovaries out, please start taking MHT straight away, immediately after surgery, if you have not yet reached menopause. If you've already passed menopause and have a hysterectomy, then it doesn't impair your brain function. Now, there's a couple of things I want to say. The first sad thing is your gynecologist won't tell you that. And that's not because they're hiding the information from you. It's because most gynecologists don't know that Alzheimer's is a risk factor after early hysterectomy, i.e. before the age of 45. And I also get a lot of women who say, but I don't want to take unnatural hormones. To which I will reply, if you've just had a hysterectomy and if you've just had your ovaries out, that is an unnatural procedure. So to compensate for the unnatural procedure, you need an unnatural intervention, if you want to call it that. The other point I want to make, and this is where this explains why there has been conflicting results in research. The research that shows that menopausal hormones therapy does not reduce your risk of dementia, and in some cases even increases your risk. The problem with that research is twofold. One, if it was found to increase your risk of dementia, it was taken more than 10 years after you started menopause. So if you're 10 years past menopause, do not take menopausal hormone therapy. And that's because your brain, after not having any estradiol around, will downregulate estradiol receptors. So that means it's kind of like switching the receptors off. So if you then start taking estradiol and it gets to your brain, it's like there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to attach. There's nothing. Okay. The other problem with the research that has found negative findings is that it was done with really old preparations of estradiol that aren't used anymore. It was the studies were done with estrogen made from pregnant horses' urine. So it was not identical to our own hormones. Today, the hormones that are prescribed are identical to the ones our own bodies make. So they're bioidentical and therefore safe for just about all women, unless there are specific contraindications such as very rare breast cancers. So yes, even though you'll read that the research is not conclusive, it's because they haven't separated out how the different studies were done. But the short answer is yes. Personally, I take MHT, not because I had symptoms, but purely to reduce my risk of Alzheimer's. That's why I take it.
It's so interesting you said this, because I can think of 4 or 5 people I know who had early hysterectomies under the age of 40, none of whom were told to take any MHT and are not on it now. Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there, right?
There is. Well, it's not it's just a lack of education, lack of doctors being educated. And just the other thing I want to mention, if you still have a uterus, then in addition to estradiol, you also need to take a form of progesterone. But your doctor will definitely know that. So, because unopposed estrogen increases the risk of uterine cancer. You need to have both hormones, estrogen and progesterone, if you still have an intact uterus.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. So let's come on to talking about genetics then. For example, my mum's dad died of dementia prior to the age of 60. Does
Okay.
that put me at a higher risk because it's in my family?
That depends on why he got the dementia. Some early onset, which that was under the age of 60, are genetically predetermined. So let me explain. There are two categories of genes related to Alzheimer's. One category is referred to as deterministic. That means if you inherit that gene, at this stage, you are almost guaranteed to get Alzheimer's, but you can nonetheless delay the onset and slow progression through brain healthy choices. But deterministic means you're more than likely to get it. And we know of only 3 genes in this category, and your grandfather might have had one of these: presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and amyloid precursor protein. You can get, if you want to, you can get tested for that.
So where would I go to get tested? Would I just go to my
You
GP?
just go to your GP and ask for blood tests. But I would strongly recommend genetic counselling. Actually, you can read the chapter in my book on genetic counselling, save you $300, because I go through the whole counselling process. But yeah, if either of your parents carries one of these genes, there's a 50% chance the affected parent will pass the gene to you. But fortunately, these genes are very rare and they account for less than 5% of Alzheimer's cases worldwide. I'm the kind of person that would want to know. My father had Alzheimer's and his mother had Alzheimer's, but they got it over the age of 70. So I didn't get tested for the deterministic genes because the age at which they got Alzheimer's ruled those genes out. The genes I got tested for were the second category of genes referred to as risk factor genes. Now, if you inherit what's known as a risk factor gene, you are more prone to getting Alzheimer's than somebody without the gene, but you're by no means destined for the disease. And the people with these genes, they respond most strongly to all the lifestyle interventions that I want to discuss with you. And the best known Alzheimer's risk factor gene is called ApoE4. If you inherit one copy of this gene from a parent, just one copy, you've got a 2 to 4-fold higher risk of Alzheimer's than somebody without this gene. If you inherit 2 copies of ApoE4, you are 8 to 10 times more likely to get Alzheimer's. You may or may not recall, in November 2022, actor Chris Hemsworth, he announced that he was taking a break from acting to reassess his personal priorities after discovering that he had 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene when he was filming the documentary series Limitless. Now, Chris has fantastic doctors. He is doing a lot. I know that he's doing a lot of preventative stuff. I don't think he's going to get it, even though he's 8 to 10 times more likely than somebody without those genes to get Alzheimer's. And that's because he's so proactive in terms of his exercise, his diet, his social stimulation, and all the other things he's doing. The other thing that plays a significant role in how the ApoE4 gene affects the brain is your ethnicity. So, for example, people who are Nigerian, who are Hispanic or Latino, much less likely to develop Alzheimer's if they have the E4 gene than if you're Caucasian or Japanese. So a single gene never tells the whole story. And the reason we think, and so basically, a person's risk of Alzheimer's is very much influenced by other genes they've inherited along with the ApoE4, which we don't test for. They are tested for in research. When I went to the genetic counselor myself, because I said, I want all of these genes tested, not just the ApoE4, so I can get my whole composite risk. And she's going, no, we don't do them. You can't get those tested yet. So the message is most genes have on-off switches, or at least dimmer switches, that are influenced by what we eat, how much we exercise, the quality of our sleep, how we manage stress, the toxins we're exposed to, even what we believe about aging. So our genes only tell part of the story. They do not determine our destiny. Our decisions are much more powerful than our destiny. Let me give you just one example. This is an amazing piece of research. Carriers of the ApoE4 gene who have a positive view of aging do not develop Alzheimer's as a higher rate than non-carriers. In other words, if you have an optimistic view of aging, it cancels out the negative effects of the ApoE4 gene. Isn't that extraordinary?
Wow.
So
See, ladies, this is what it's all about, is we're aging stronger, bolder, wiser. We're taking our destiny into our own hands. We're asking ourselves the question, how can I age in a way that excites me? Where am I taking my future in my destiny into my hands and designing the life that I want as I age? And when we have that reframe, when we have that perception and outlook on our life, we lower our risk, I would imagine, of not just dementia, but many other diseases as well.
Yes. Absolutely. Lower our risk of heart disease, everything. So, when people go, just give me the first step to aging better, feel better about aging. That is genuinely the first step.
Yeah.
And likewise, people who have 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene, they nullify their increased risk if they engage in daily or almost daily physical exercise. Now, in contrast, if an ApoE4 carrier develops type 2 diabetes, that their risk of Alzheimer's skyrockets.
Wow.
And also, if you're an ApoE4 carrier, you're less able to get away with smoking, less able to get away with alcohol, less able to recover after a head injury. And as little as a few alcoholic drinks a month is detrimental to the brain of an ApoE4 carrier.
How common is being an ApoE4 carrier?
Maybe 15%
Okay.
of the population, maybe.
That's
So it's not that high. It's not that high.
Well, I don't know, but 15% still of the population, that's still pretty significant numbers.
But as I said, it's only a risk factor gene. And if you do everything that we will hopefully cover in this podcast, you don't have an increased risk.
Ladies, my best-selling program, Thrive After 40, is here, and I would love you to join us. We start on the 25th of May. It is a program that I designed after completing my menopause weight loss coach training, and I discovered the 10 protocols that really work to help women in their 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond to reclaim their energy, to sleep better, to reduce bloating, to start to feel alive and to feel like they're truly thriving. I will teach you those protocols along with so much other information that will support you to feel full through the day without having those energy dips at 3 o'clock where we're reaching for the biscuit tin. I'll support you to know what your beautiful body needs because your nutritional requirements are different in perimenopause to what they are postmenopause. If you would like to join us in Thrive After 40, that has helped hundreds of women to lose belly fat, increase energy, sleep better, reduce anxiety, either head to my website, sarahrusbatch.com, or click on the link in show notes for Thrive After 40. We start on the 25th of May, and I would love you to join us. So if you can still develop Alzheimer's even if you don't carry the ApoE4 gene?
Absolutely. Even without the gene, you can develop it. Yeah.
So let's just talk about some of the other risk factors. I was just going to say, we carrying this gene would be one, but let's just touch briefly on diet, on sugar, on alcohol and medication. What are some of the other risk factors to us? And you've talked about exercise, developing dementia.
Let's tick off the medications first, because they're very common. Firstly, there's a very common class of medications known as anticholinergics. Remember that word because you're going to go to your doctor and say, are any of the medications I'm on anticholinergics? Some are prescription, some are over the counter. And they are found in some, but not all, antihistamines, antidepressants, cough medications, and anti-incontinence drugs. So they're very common. So always ask your doctor or chemist, is this medication an anticholinergic? And if the answer is yes, ask for an alternative because they definitely impair brain function. Other drugs to avoid are benzodiazepines like Valium or temazepam. They're used to treat anxiety or insomnia. I never recommend these drugs except in very exceptional circumstances for very short periods of time. Opioid painkillers, they can cause delirium, which is Delirium is acute confusion and disorientation and hallucinations, especially in older people. And while chronic opioid use has been linked to reduced brain volume and a decrease in people's ability to solve problems and think on their feet, if you stop them quickly, you will regain your function. And one more important class of drugs to be wary of, and all these drugs, by the way, while we're young, they're not going to affect our cognition significantly. That they might sort of briefly a little bit, but really we're not going to notice. It's as we age that they start to have a bigger impact on us. And the other big one to be wary of is corticosteroids. And they treat, inflammatory conditions, autoimmune conditions, asthma, arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, eczema, psoriasis. So again, they're very common. But they can affect your memory, attention, concentration, complex thinking. Now, this does not mean abruptly stopping any medications you're on. That's dangerous. But it does mean taking your medications to your doctor and asking if any of them might be causing medication fog or brain fog. And if the answer is yes, discuss alternatives and slowly wean off them in consultation with your doctor.
Okay, that's really useful to know.
So that's, I think that's an important one because it's often overlooked. And it's like sometimes people go, oh, I can't believe when mum just switched her, bladder medications, suddenly she's functioning so much better. Okay, so it's an important one. You asked about sugar and alcohol. Huge risk factors for developing dementia. As for which is worse, tough one. I'll work through the mechanisms and you can decide for yourself. So let's start with sugar because it's everywhere. And here's the problem. The poison is in the dose. I'm not saying you can't have birthday cake, but birthdays happen once a year. So birthday cake, sweet treats are designed to be eaten a couple of times a year, maybe half a dozen, once a month, not 3 times a day, which is almost what we're doing today. Because today, by the time a child is 8 years old, they've already consumed more sugar than the average person had in their entire life a century ago.
Wow.
Let that sink in. So we're just having too much sugar. And I'm not talking natural sugar in berries and carrots and pumpkin. No, nobody developed dementia by eating too many fruits and vegetables, okay?
Yeah.
The contributor is the added sugar to 80% of the processed foods on our supermarket shelves. Okay, why? Table sugar, known as sucrose, is made up of 2 smaller molecules or monosaccharides, which is the smallest type of sugar, called glucose and fructose. And these 2 molecules are metabolized, i.e. broken down for energy, very differently in our body. So I'll talk about them separately. We'll start with fructose. And let me just say, yes, fructose is the sugar that's found in fruit. But when fructose is packaged with fruit, in blueberries, in an apple, for instance, it's packaged with water, with fiber, with vitamin C, with a whole lot of phytonutrients which mitigate the harmful effects of fructose. So that's why I'm not telling you to quit natural foods. I'm telling you to quit added sugar. So when brain cells metabolize, i.e. break down fructose, it sets off a series of chemical reactions which first and foremost result in a drop in brain cell energy. Now, remember what I said happened in menopause? A drop in brain cell energy. It's also the hallmark of Alzheimer's. So can you see that in menopause now, we've already got the estrogen dropping, lowering our energy levels. You add on top of that truckloads of sugar and your brain is just starved of energy. So that's the first effect of fructose. Secondly, it leads to a whole lot of other things like reduced mitochondrial function. So the little organelles in our brain that produce energy aren't working as well. It would result in oxidative stress, inflammation, insulin resistance, which also impairs brain function, increased uric acid inside brain cells. And if you're not familiar with any of those terms or processes, let me assure you that none of them are good and they all drive dementia.
But let's just pause for a moment, Helena. So can you share with the listeners, where is fructose most commonly found? We've talked about fruit, but if we talk about in our modern world, my understanding is fructose would be in like fruit juice. It would be quite high. If you buy like a
Yes.
carton of juice, it would be in chocolate bars and some fructose or high fructose corn syrup we hear talked about a lot. Is that the same as what you're talking about?
Yes, we don't use in Australia so much high fructose corn syrup. It's used in a lot of foods in America, but just table sugar, sucrose, any table sugar, whether that's, cane sugar, beet sugar, coconut sugar, sugar extracted from anything is sucrose. Because in nature, fructose never occurs on its own. It's always bound with glucose as sucrose. So basically, any sugar added to basically you'll find the sugar that we should not be eating has been added to processed foods. And the obvious things are anything that tastes sweet, unless it's been sweetened with an artificial sweetener, which is also no good for our brain, but in a different way. But anything that tastes sweet for a start, so biscuits, cakes, lollies, ice creams. The ones that are deceptive are all breakfast cereals are sugar bombs. They're sugar bombs. Your salad dressings, a lot of your nut milks have added sugar to increase the flavour. I remember a girlfriend came to stay with me. She only drank soy milk. I said, fine, I'll go and get you soy milk. It took me half an hour of reading every soy milk carton to finally find one that didn't have added sugar or added emulsifiers or added vegetable oils, all of which harm brain health and overall health. And I was so proud. I brought it home to her and I said, I got you your soy milk. And she said, oh, I've never tried this brand. When she tried it, she nearly spat it out. She said, this is the most disgusting tasting soy milk I've ever had. And I said, that's because it doesn't have anything added to it. It's just soybeans and water. She's like, oh. So that's why sugar is added to everything. So yeah, fruit juice. Okay, what's the problem with fruit juice? Unfortunately, and I've done a whole podcast episode myself on why fruit juice is not a great brain healthy option. Once you've juiced the fruit, you've removed the fiber. And what you're left with is water and sugar. And when you sit down to eat an apple or an orange, how many would you eat in one sitting?
One.
How many would you need for a small juice?
Probably about 15.
No, 4 to 5. That's a small juice. You'd need 4 to 5 apples or 4 to 5 oranges. You would never sit down and eat 4 to 5 apples or oranges, but you're getting 4 to 5 apples worth of sugar. Way too much. And because it's in liquid form, the worst way to consume sugar is as a liquid. So my number one takeaway, the worst thing you can do for your brain is drink soft drinks. Every soft drink is a bullet to your brain. Just think of it that way. And unfortunately, fruit juices fall into the same category. So any of those energy drinks, sports drinks, cordials, they are all bullets to your brain because it's a massive onslaught of sugar to your brain and it immediately starts to erode your brain function. Now, if you are an Olympic athlete and you're guzzling soft drinks, it doesn't even get to your brain because you're so athletic, you're burning off all the sugar before it gets anywhere. But for us mere mortals, and when I say, you've got to be an Olympic athlete to get away with it. For us mere mortals, soft drinks are off the menu if we want to look after our brain. And the final thing, just an example, fructose also interferes with genes in a region of our brain called the hippocampus, which is one of the brain's memory processing centers. So it immediately impairs brain function through affecting our genes. Fructose also interferes with the hypothalamus, which is the major hormone-producing region of our brain. And it interferes with communication between brain cells. Now, let me tell you, this is anecdotal. There's probably research on this, but I'm just telling you from a clinical point of view. I believe that one of the major contributors to declining fertility, you know how infertility, subfertility, so many people are now needing IVF. Why is that? I think excess sugar is a major contributor because the fructose interferes with the hormone-producing region of your brain, the hypothalamus. And I've done experiments with patients, and I can tell you, couples will come in and say, we haven't fallen pregnant, and we've tried for 18 months, can we start IVF? And I go, can we do an experiment first? For 3 months, can you just eliminate all sugar and refined carbohydrates from your diet, and let's see what happens. And I can tell you more than half of them come back and go, OMG, I felt pregnant.
Wow.
Is that coincidence? I doubt it, because it's happened too much, too often. But anyway, as I said, that's just my personal anecdotal experience. And when you give lab rats fructose, whether it's high fructose corn syrup or you just put sugar in their water, their memory declines dramatically. And rats, which love finding their way through mazes, can't find their way through a maze. They perform as if they're drunk. So that is why fructose is so damaging for our brain. I can hear you've got a question.
Well, I think it's more a reflection, and to share with my community listening now, I think, I'm so passionate about empowering women to be able to age well. And this is not, of course, we all go, oh, I'm not eating sugar because I need to lose weight. This is not about diet culture. This is not about aesthetics. This is about your brain health as you age. This is about empowering you to have the knowledge, to have the healthiest body that allows you to have the best life. None of this is about you've got to make your body a certain size to fit what society tells us is a certain size. And that's what I love about sharing this information, is the importance of, this is not about reducing sugar and processed food to make your body smaller. This is about reducing sugar and processed food to make your brain healthier and to make your life better. And that's the important reframe there, is remembering all of this is about nourishing our beautiful body.
Yeah. And remember, I said that sugar was sucrose, is fructose and glucose. Now, glucose is not inherently harmful because glucose is used by your brain as an essential fuel. It functions very well with glucose. However, too much glucose, i.e., too many refined carbohydrates, so that's bread, rice, pasta, all those foods in the supermarket, ready-made meals, they just have loads of sugar or refined carbohydrates in them. When you have glucose in excess, it stimulates insulin release. When your insulin levels stay up too high for too long, you get insulin resistance. And that's because insulin has many roles, but one of them is a simple way of thinking about insulin. It goes to all your cells, and it's like a key that unlocks the door to allow glucose to enter the cell. And glucose is used by your cells for energy. But if you're bombarding your body with glucose, your cells going, enough. It's like, I can't fit any more furniture into my house. We've just got to stop. And so your cells become insulin resistant, including your brain cells. And that then starts to cause an inflammatory reaction. And it starts to impair the way your cells function and use energy. So, and especially if you get type 2 diabetes, that's a red flag for insulin resistance in your brain. Also for heart disease and fatty liver disease. Heart disease, fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, and abdominal obesity, i.e., not the fat around your hips. That does nothing to increase your risk of dementia. However, fat around our belly, which indicates fat infiltrating our internal organs, like our liver, our pancreas, our gallbladder, all of that. Once we get fat there, it's a different type of fat to the fat on our hips, and it releases chemicals that increase the inflammation throughout our body and brain. So that's why too much glucose is a bad thing. And finally, this is only recent research has discovered that excess glucose can be converted to fructose. If there's too much glucose floating around, for one reason or another, your body will convert that glucose to fructose. So then you get all the downstream damaging effects of fructose. And this is one thing that makes adds to the damaging effects of alcohol. It's an indirectly damaging effect of alcohol. Glucose is converted to fructose more easily in the presence of alcohol.
Wow. And we know that there's lots of glucose and if you're having with Coke or orange juice or ginger beer or anything like that, you've got the sugar that's in that anyway.
Yes, exactly. So alcohol on its own, the safest level is 0. And Canada is the first country, I think it happened, I think it's been over a year now.
Yeah.
Canada changed its guidelines to state the safest level of alcohol consumption is 0. If you look at the research, any more than 4 standard Australian drinks per week, so that means half a standard drink per day, any more than that starts to shrink our brain and significantly increase the risk of Alzheimer's. So it appears that you might get away with half a glass on, most nights of the week. You might be able to get away with that. It doesn't appear to cause a lot of damage. But remember, alcohol affects women much more strongly than men because of our biology. So if you're an ApoE4 carrier, remember that the gene that increases your risk, then you can't afford to drink any alcohol, because any amount of alcohol increases your risk of Alzheimer's if you've got that gene. If you don't have that gene, a glass or 2 every now and again is probably not going to make any difference.
And I think it's also really important here to go half of a standard measure. Now, that's not what Sarah Rusbatch half a glass was. Back when I was drinking half, if you'd said to me I can have half a glass a day, that would probably be the equivalent of about 2 units. Like most people at home are pouring a glass, probably 3 units in one glass, because the glasses are so large, right? So let's just remember, a standard serve is, I think, 125 mils or 150 mils of wine. And so if we're looking at 75 mils or 100 mils, right?
I think so. 100 mils of wine is one standard drink.
So half a standard drink a day is a couple of mouthfuls, ladies. We are not talking about a big goblet that we have half of. So it's just remembering that if anything above 4 units per week, that's probably 2 glasses of wine per week. We know there's loads of evidence out there that shows home pour of wine or a large glass in a pub is 2 to 3 units, depending on the alcohol volume of that wine. So 2 glasses of wine per week, anything above that, we're starting to increase our risk of dementia. Yes. So we are going to come on to the good news. I just want to quickly touch on the other risk factors. We don't need to go into too much detail on them, but just to be aware of would be poor sleep, low exercise, high stress. Anything that I've missed there?
Look, can we double down on the exercise?
For sure.
Because I think everyone knows, I should do, half an hour of exercise a day, brisk walking. Firstly, let me say that any exercise is better than no exercise. However, when it comes to your brain, if you want an optimally functioning brain, if you want to maximally reduce your risk of dementia, firstly, exercise is not negotiable. I want you to look at exercise. I want to ask yourself this question. Would you ever say to yourself when you got up in the morning, you know what, today I'm only going to have a shower and I'm only going to brush my teeth and I'm only going to get dressed if I have time and if I feel like it? I mean, you'd say, well, don't be ridiculous. Of course I'm going to have a shower, get dressed and brush my teeth, unless I'm sick and in bed all day. Exercise has to fall into that category. It's not negotiable if you want a healthy brain. And you need 3 types of exercise. Okay? Like I tell if somebody sort of comes in with dementia, I go, the first commitment you have to make is to move. Movement is medicine for your mind. No 2 ways about it. If you do not do any exercise, then your brain function will decline. No questions asked. It's a far bigger predictor than any gene ever will be, as in a sedentary life. So that's the first thing. It is super, super important. So you need 3 types of exercise: aerobic exercise, which is endurance training. You need strength training, and you need to practice your balance. That's the one that's often forgotten. So what do you need in terms of aerobic endurance? That's, walking briskly, running, swimming, cycling, rowing, dancing, playing tennis or pickleball. They're all those you're getting breathless type of exercises. How hard do you need to work? The short answer is the more intense, the bigger the benefits and the less you have to do. But It doesn't mean you have to go full on all the time. And here's the other important thing. You must enjoy your exercise. If you do not enjoy it, if you're going, oh, I've got to go and work out today, then you're producing cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Cortisol erodes brain function, so you're actually negating the benefits of exercise. So first and foremost, find a form of exercise that you enjoy doing. Otherwise, and the other reason is you're not going to keep doing it if you don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
So find what you like and do a minimum of 20 to 30 minutes a day and of moderate to high intensity if you want to get the benefits. But let me reiterate, even a very slow, short walk is better than nothing. But really, you should be aiming for getting breathless to the point where you can't sing along to the music if you've got music playing. You can still carry on a conversation. So if you're jogging with someone, you can still have a bit of a conversation between breaths, but you can't be able to sing along to the music. That's the definition of moderate intensity. And that's where you start to see some really good benefits. High intensity means you can't even carry on a conversation. Now, here's the great news. Even 30 seconds of really intense exercise scattered throughout your day will give your brain a burst of chemicals called myokines produced by your muscles that enhance your brain function. Even 30 seconds. So on those days when I'm, flying from one state to the other, racing to a conference, giving a presentation, not getting back to the hotel till the end of the day, I will go to that hotel gym and even just work out for 5 minutes at maximum intensity and know that I'm giving my brain a benefit. So anything is better than nothing. And the less you do, the more intense you do it. So that's
where finding little breaks through the day can be great. Leave your desk and do some jumping jacks. Go and walk up and down the stairs at work. Go, like I do high knees, I do jumping jacks. I'll do like a few little things with the dog in the garden for 5 minutes and then I go back to my desk. But just finding those little pockets through the day, we can all find a minute or two to just get our heart rate up.
Yes. And what stops people is not recognizing that it makes a difference. 5 minutes isn't going to make a difference. I'm here to tell you it does. It will. And particularly, there's a chemical that our brain produces called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And it stimulates the growth of new brain cells and new connections between brain cells. And the best thing to increase BDNF is high-intensity exercise. So that's why exercise is so important for our brain. Secondly, strength training. From our mid-30s onwards, we lose 5 to 8% of our muscles, men and women, if we do no strength training. And our modern lives, we don't really use our muscles much. We don't even hang up the washing. We just throw it into the dryer. So we need to do some form of strength training. If we don't, the weaker our muscles, the weaker our mind. Next time you go to your GP or your physiotherapist or your personal trainer, get them to test your hand grip strength. The correlation is this: the stronger your hand grip, the better you perform in tests of memory, processing speed, vocabulary. And that's because, have you heard of the gut-brain connection?
Mm-hmm.
The communication between our gut and the trillions of bacteria in our gut and our brain? Well, there is an equally important muscle-brain connection. Every time we work out and strengthen our muscles, they send healthy chemicals to our brain to help our brain function better. So any form of strength training, you could go to the gym and do a pump class. You could use the machines or the free weights. If you hate the gym, Google strength training at home using my own body weight or using bands or buying a few weights yourself. There are thousands of exercises you can do at home. Ideally, 2 to 3 times a week, 30 to 40 minutes. It's not a lot compared to the benefits that you get from that. And people think, oh, I'm going to hate it or I'm going to bulk up. Trust me, you won't bulk up. And people surprise themselves how much they enjoy it. Because you get I don't know about you. I know you do strength training as well, but I'm on a high. When I've done strength training, now I don't always feel like doing it. Let's get that. Sometimes I go, oh, I'm tired. But I go, no, I'm going to go to that hotel gym or I'm going to go to my own gym and do a bit of strength training. After the first 5 to 10 minutes, I feel I can take on the world because of the changes in my brain chemistry. It also stimulates those feel-good chemicals, serotonin, endorphins, noradrenaline, dopamine. So the minute you get started, you actually increase your motivation to keep going. Because I will play games with myself. I go, I only have to do 5 minutes. I only just have to do today. I'll just do biceps and triceps. That's all I have to do. Well, once I've done my biceps and triceps, no way. I'm going to do shoulders. I'm going to do chest. I'm going to do legs as well, because it's changed my brain chemistry and I feel like doing more.
Absolutely. And ladies listening, if you haven't listened to episode 4 that I did with Hayley Babcock, go and listen. It's all about strength training. I've been following Hayley's program for 18 months. And the gains that I've had from adding in significant strength training to my life, like on my visceral fat, how much my tummy reduced by adding in strength training, building more muscle. It's been a game changer for me. And also with me training for the London Marathon at the moment, 0 injury because my body is so strong from the strength training I've been doing.
Yep. And the final thing I'll mention is train your balance. So that could mean doing yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, body balance. All those classes are great for that. Or when you're waiting at the supermarket, stand on one leg. And just because the goal is 30 to 60 seconds standing on one leg without holding on to anything. And if you can do it with your eyes closed, you are right up there with the best. Dad and I, when my father was alive, I used to do it with him at the supermarket. Come on, we've got to boost our brain by standing on one leg. And people would look at us as though we were a bit strange. And I would explain the rationale between, and I'll explain to you in a moment, the rationale between, better balance, better brain function. By the time we finished paying for our shopping, the entire row, the entire queue was standing on their leg. But anyway, why is balance so important? The part of our brain that regulates balance is called the cerebellum. It sits in the back of our head here, and it also regulates our thoughts and emotions. So the same part of our brain that is responsible for physical coordination and balance is responsible for a lot of our mental health and having clear thinking. And what research has found is that if you have depression, stress-related disorders, anxiety, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, your balance is poor. And when you improve the person's balance, you improve their mental health. So this is a great one. If you've got depression and anxiety, just improving your balance, unbelievably, will improve your mental health.
Wow. So while we're talking about some of these things that we can do, let's move on to really, really getting clear on the optimal ways that we can improve our brain health and reduce our risk of dementia. What are they?
Okay, there are a lot of things. In my book, I've got 80 ways to boost your brain. So we're not going to get through all 80. But where I would start is start with a reason, not a routine. What I mean by that is what stops people implementing healthy habits is the belief, this is my experience, that it's not going to make enough difference. So before you even start on a brain boosting program or think of what you're going to do, write down 50 reasons why you want to boost your brain and the difference it's going to make to your life. Everything from, staying as sharp at age 90 as I was at age 30, being able to travel the world after retirement, just enjoying life more, all those reasons. So get clear in your mind that what you do makes a difference. Then the second one I would say, give your brain a reason to stay sharp and it will. In other words, continue to set meaningful goals. It doesn't matter what the goal is, as long as it brings you joy and fulfillment. What excites you? What brings you the greatest sense of purpose and connection to others? Go and do it. Because our brain loves to get stimulated. So when you retire from work, don't retire from life. If you look at the stats around the world, the earlier the age of retirement, the earlier the onset of dementia. If you don't continue to stimulate your brain, continue to learn new things, give yourself challenges, expose yourself to new environments, go to museums, do some kind of course, learn a foreign language, a musical instrument, an art, a craft, digital photography. Just keep learning new things. And they need to be taking you out of your comfort zone. People go, what about crosswords and Sudoku puzzles? They're good for you only if you're not good at them. If you find those things like really easy, like I'll do them on the plane just as we're taking off because you've got to switch off your devices. I don't think Sudoku is doing my brain a lot of good because I'm just It's just fun. It's kind of like distraction. Maybe if I did some of the really hard ones. But all I'm saying is you've got to stretch yourself. It's got to be hard for you. Not so hard that you're discouraged and go, oh, I give up, but just hard enough to keep you interested and stimulated and striving. So they're probably not answers that you thought I was going to say, but they're really, really important.
Yeah.
Give your brain reason to stay sharp, continue to set those goals, continue to challenge yourself. And the third really big one was discovered by Harvard researchers, psychiatrist Robert Waldinger. He's done a TED talk on it. They looked at Harvard graduates and they wanted to answer the question, what is the greatest predictor of a long, happy, healthy life? And they followed them for 70 years before they published the first results, and it's still going. I think they're up to the 83rd or 85th year now. They're still following those that are still alive. What do you think? Was it food, exercise, yoga, meditation, fame, fortune, socioeconomic success? What? Not smoking, not drinking. What was the biggest predictor of a long, happy, healthy life, including reducing your risk of dementia?
I would guess connection.
Yes.
Okay.
Having good relationships.
Mm.
And it's relationships across all areas of your life. So not just having supportive family and friends and those close relationships, having a confidant, essential. You've got to have a 3 a.m. friend. Who can you ring at 3 a.m. that you know will pick up the phone and be there for you, unless their phone is on silent? So having those close connections, but also just having casual conversations with neighbors, shopkeepers, baristas, Uber drivers. They all feed our brain with neurochemicals that lower our stress and improve our thinking skills. So feeling part of a community, playing pickleball and then having a cup of coffee or whatever with your partner and the people you're playing with afterwards. So it's just being more social generally and having those really close supportive relationships, both of them. I've also done an entire podcast on relationships and the different types of relationships and how they all feed us in different ways. So relationships critically important, and cultivate a positive attitude to aging. I'm actually speaking at the American Society on Aging conference in Atlanta, Georgia next month, and they are so switched on about how ageist our society is. And that negative outlook, you look at it, everything is anti-aging creams, powders, lotions, potions. It's like aging is a bad thing. Like, why is aging a bad thing when it's going to happen to all of us? And think of the alternative. The only way not to age is to die young. So this is something we're all going to be facing. And if we look at it as a negative in our life, it actually accelerates brain shrinkage. The hippocampus, I mentioned earlier, our brain's learning and memory center, shrinks 3 times faster in people who complain about getting old compared to people who have an optimistic outlook.
Wow.
So focus on what you're gaining, not losing as you age. This is a really great exercise as you're going through menopause, because it's a particularly challenging time, because there are physical changes that we really feel are wearing us down and we feel more tired. Write down 50 fantastic things about turning 50, or if you're 49 things that are great about being 49. Sit down and write them down or type them up. What are 40 great things about turning 40? Write them up, and just think about, okay, I don't care as much about what other people think. I've nearly paid off my mortgage. Whatever. The children are grown up. I'm a proud parent. Whatever you think feels great is great about the age you are. Write it down. At the end of that exercise, you'll have energized yourself. You'll have fed your brain with serotonin and dopamine. You'll be more motivated to go out there and make your life even better. So switching that lens through which we view aging is critically important.
Yeah, love that.
And we've got to look at positive role models as well. Google Patty Jones and Nico. Patty Jones, she was in her mid-80s, touring the world as an acrobatic salsa dancer. So if you haven't started salsa dancing, that is probably one of the biggest things to boost our brain. A dance a day keeps dementia away. because dancing is physically stimulating. It is aerobic, it is strength training, it is balance. So it covers them all off. Tango dancing in particular has been studied as significantly reducing the risk of dementia. So a dance a day keeps dementia away, and a laugh a day keeps dementia away, because feeling positive emotions feeds our brain with positive neurotransmitters. When we feel positive, we actually manage stress better, lowers our cortisol levels. We're less likely to feel stuck in a rut. We're more creative. So attitudinal things are just as important as diet and exercise.
Yeah, love that. And then I guess with dance as well, you're having to learn a routine. You're using your brain
Yes.
to memorize steps and everything like that. So yeah, that's
And
brilliant.
it's socially stimulating. So it's mental, it's
Totally.
physical, it's social. Yes.
And then in terms of the foods, we've talked about what's not great for our brain, but what we want to be adding in, I'm guessing you're going to say the whole food diet. So we really want to be making sure we are having whole foods that don't have ingredients, because all the different polyphenols and vitamins and nutrients are going to feed our brain.
Look, this is my advice. I mean, it's a bit tongue in cheek, but it's true. You can eat just get rid of the processed foods, and what you're left with is home cooked meals. It doesn't matter if you're vegan, vegetarian, omnivore, or carnivore, as long as you eat food that's from the land, from the sea, from the sky, or from a tree. Not from a packet, not from a tin. If it comes in a box, I'd throw it in the bin. Of course, it is more nuanced than this, but if in doubt, give the product a miss. If you like, and I'm not into individual foods, but I made up an acronym, BRAIN Foods, and each letter stands for a food that's healthy for your brain.
Yes.
Okay, the B in BRAIN Foods, B stands for berries and broccoli. People often talk about blueberries. Any berries are fantastic for your brain. So berries and broccoli. R, radish and rucola. So rucola is rocket green leafy vegetables, basically. A, avocado and anchovies. Avocado because of the monounsaturated fatty acids. Remember, our brain is 60% fat. The worst advice doctors ever gave was to go on a low-fat diet. Your brain does not function well on a low-fat diet. You need the monounsaturated fatty acids from your avocado, and you need the omega-3s from your anchovies and your other fatty fish, which I'll get onto in a moment. So that's the A. I stands for iodine. Now, that's a mineral found in seaweed, seafood, eggs, iodized salt. And the problem here is our vegetables used to be a rich source of iodine. They are not anymore because our soils are becoming iodine depleted. So I recommend iodized salt and your seaweed and your seafood. N stands for nuts with nothing added. Just buy them raw and unsalted. If you want them roasted, put them in a low temperature oven for like 15 minutes. Do them yourself. Don't buy them salted because they're going to be roasted in vegetable oils, which you don't want. F, so we've covered the BRAIN. F stands for fermented foods. Sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, yogurt, unsweetened, of course. Very good for not just your gut, but also your brain. O stands for olive oil, another fabulous monounsaturated oil for your brain. The other O, onions are fine. D stands for D vitamins, which you can get from oily fish, mushrooms, but it's really hard to get enough vitamin D from our diet. So we need 10 to 15 minutes of sunshine without sunscreen per day. In winter, or if you're not living in Australia or the Gold Coast, then I do recommend a D supplement. I don't recommend many supplements, but vitamin D is such an easy fix. 1,000 international units a day. You will not do yourself any harm, and you're protecting your brain, because low vitamin D levels, can cause low cognition. It's an essential vitamin. And S, that last S, stands for sardines and wild salmon, not Tasmanian or Atlantic salmon. I'm sorry, because the way that Tasmanian and Atlantic salmon are farmed, they actually don't contain any omega-3 fatty acids. You can get wild salmon in tins, which is perfectly healthy. You can also buy New Zealand salmon. They farm it differently.
Wow, okay. Interesting. This is so useful to know. And this is what I love about these conversations is we've talked about the risk factors, but we're talking about the practical takeaways. I'm curious to know, if someone gets a diagnosis, they're in the early stages, say,
Yeah.
can adding in everything you're talking about, I'm guessing we can't reverse it, but can we keep it in the early stages for a very, very long time if we were to exercise every day, cut crap out of our diets, make sure that we're aging positively, we're keeping ourselves stimulated, we've got great connections? What's the research around that?
Yes, yes, and yes. So, yes, if you have a diagnosis of, put it this way, the earlier you intervene, the better your results. Okay. There's several things. You might have subjective cognitive impairment. That's kind of the first noticeable stage. You notice there's something not quite as sharp about you as in the past. Nobody else is noticing, but you notice. That is you've got to intervene at that stage, because you can reverse that
So
just by
what would you
doing.
do at that stage? You'd go to your doctor and say what?
Oh, your doctor's not going to pick it up. So don't go to your doctor.
Okay, right.
No, I'm just saying, your doctor's not going to pick up that mild level of cognitive impairment. Your doctor will pick it up when it gets to the point, that subjective cognitive impairment.
Okay.
Only you notice that. Your doctor will pick it up when it spills into mild cognitive impairment.
Okay. And that's when
Okay.
it'd show in an MRI? Is that how you would be testing it?
Yeah, probably. That's when it'll show up in neuropsychological testing, some of the more precise and detailed cognitive function tests. It may or may not show up on scans at that stage.
Okay.
So, but and not all cases, even without doing anything, not all cases of mild cognitive impairment progress to dementia. So that's another case of absolutely, I've got, almost, no, I could probably honestly say 100% of patients, either don't, of my patients that implement everything we've talked about and more, will not progress and can reverse it back to fully functioning. And it's, in inverted commas, cured. But I prefer to use the word reversed, because if you take up alcohol, soft drinks, smoking, and sedentary lifestyle, you'll get the cognitive impairment back. If you now have a diagnosis of dementia early, you can also reverse it.
Wow.
I speak at a monthly, it's called a Rementia retreat. So it helps you remember. It's run by a company called Videri. It's free. So, I'm not making any money on this, but if you have a diagnosis or someone you know of dementia and they're not at the late stage where they're catatonic and don't recognize anyone, but if they're at the early stage where they still know what's going on and it's like, I've just had this diagnosis, what the hell do I do? Because my doctor just said, get your affairs in order. There's nothing we can do about it. When a doctor tells you that, they're saying there's nothing they can do about it. Doesn't mean there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, so I speak at these dementia retreats once a month, and the whole goal is to teach them how to reverse their dementia.
Wow. Wow.
So, yes, if you catch it early enough, you start exercising, you lower your stress, you get a sleep study to rule out obstructive sleep apnea and get a CPAP machine. I'm just saying, I can't tell you what's caused your dementia. You'd have to go through that checklist with your doctor. You'd check, basic thyroid function, blood pressure. Do you have vitamin B12 deficiency, iron deficiency, magnesium deficiency? So you'd correct all the easily correctable things first. You'd also check your hearing and your eyesight and your sense of smell. You can improve your sense of smell just by every morning. 20 seconds. Smell your coffee. 20 seconds, smell a sliced lemon. 20 seconds, smell a eucalyptus leaf or an essential oil. 4 scents every morning, 20 seconds each, with a little break in between. You'll improve not only your smell, but also your memory. That's hot off the press research.
Wow.
So you would go through all the things we've talked about today, and you start working on them, and you figure out which ones are the worst ones for you, which ones are the most critical ones for you to address. And you start anywhere. People go, I'm overwhelmed. Your book has 80 ways of boosting our brain. How am I ever going to do all 80? Well, you probably don't need to do all 80. And I'll tell you why. Let's just say you've got really bad sleep. You're just poor sleeper. You address that through either cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or you just recognize that your sleep routine has been bad, or you're on your computer till midnight and then you wonder why you can't fall asleep. So let's just say sleep is one of your issues, you address your sleep. The minute you fix your sleep, you're going to be more likely to exercise. You're going to have fewer sugar cravings. You are going to have more motivation to do all the other things. So it's going to immediately improve other things in your life. Do you see what I'm saying? The minute you start exercising, you're going to sleep better. So you don't have to feel overwhelmed. You just start on one thing that you can improve your brain. Yeah. And it'll have a domino effect, and everything else in your life will start to improve. And the next thing you do will be easier, and it'll just get easier.
Yeah. And all of what we're talking about as well, I think it's really important to say, don't wait for a diagnosis to make any of these changes that we're talking about, because they're not just going to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's, they're going to reduce your risk of many, many other of the chronic health conditions. I've spoken to many people in the past who talk about, what are the 4 most chronic diseases that people are dying of or diagnosed with, and it's cancer, it's dementia and neurodegenerative disease, it's metabolic syndrome, and it's heart disease. Now, making all of these changes, adding in more exercise, changing our diet, improving our sleep, all of them are going to impact all 4 of those disease risks. And,
Yes.
and that's what's so empowering about this information.
Brain and body are connected. What's good for the brain is good for the heart, is good for the gut, is good for the toes. Do you know what I mean? Whatever you do to improve one system in your body is going to improve all of them, because everything is interconnected. Yeah. Can I just mention one other quick thing? The latest kid on the block for brain health is a supplement known as creatine monohydrate.
Yeah.
Now, it used to be just that bodybuilders and athletes took it to improve their performance. The research is now emerging that it may well be able to help with brain function, particularly in older people showing signs of cognitive impairment. 5 to 10 grams per day is just a white powder. Mix it with water. It's tasteless, and it's a no-brainer because it's so simple to do. And it's very, very well researched. It's considered very safe and very unlikely to do any harm. Now, as I said, the studies use different dosages. Further research is necessary to be definitive about it. But from everything I've read and seen, I think I would recommend creatine monohydrate because it's a very low risk, high probability of improvement.
And I know I've been taking it myself for about 18 months now because of helping with brain fog during menopause. And I noticed it definitely helps with that. So I highly recommend it. Dr. Helena Popovic, thank you so much. I could talk to you for about another 3 hours and still feel like I barely scratched the surface. And I'm sure there are many questions that we haven't got to, but that just means that you're going to have to come back onto the Stronger, Bolder, Wiser podcast in the future. You've been a speaker in many of my programs over the years on alcohol, on sugar, on dementia and brain health. What I love about the way you present is you bring the bad news and the good news. So that's a problem, but here's how we can support ourselves. So all of you listeners, I know you will have taken so much from this, from my Stronger, Bolder, Wiser community. Please share this episode with women in your life who you love and you care about. Please share it so that we can reach as many women as possible to give them the information of knowing how they can reduce their risk, because women are twice as likely as men to develop dementia. Where can people find out more about you, Dr. Helena? I would say definitely get a copy of your book, Can Adventure Prevent Dementia? It's brilliant. But where else should they go to find out more about your work?
Start with my website, drhelenapopovic.com. You'll learn so many brain-boosting strategies just by reading my last 10 years of blogging. Sign up to receive a weekly Healthy Bite in which I report on the latest research on boosting our brain. That's just the name I give to my blog. And I'm excited to say that I've recently started my own podcast. So do join me in conversation on my podcast, Healing with Dr. Helena.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate your time, your energy, your wisdom, your research, and sharing all of this with us. Thank you for tuning in, ladies. Please follow the podcast to help me get more incredible guests like Dr. Helena. And please share this episode with all the women in your life that you love and care about. And I will see you again next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight talking to you, as always.
Please note that this podcast is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice and is not intended to provide specific guidance for any particular situation. The use of this information is at the viewer and listener's own risk and is not a substitute for consulting a healthcare provider.